Hey, this is Shane Thompson from Hockey Outsiders podcast. I wanted to get a little waiver wire info out. Now, when I'm talking about waiver wire, it's for fantasy hockey, of course, and I do all categories leagues. And when you're looking at what to look for, I'll go to one of my teams here, and I'll show you the first thing I do before I even go looking for waiver guys. What I will do is I will scan through my roster. I will go to go to each game of the week and game by game set my active players. I use Yahoo, as you can see, and look for days where I'm missing spots. Like this is on the Tuesday, the 21st, and I've got a defense spot, bunch of defense spots open, a lot of spots open on this day. So the 21st is the day I'm looking to get games. 22, looks like I have a full roster that day, completely full. Even my bench is full, so don't need to worry about guys on the 22nd. On the 23rd, oh yeah, there's no games on the 23rd, so we'll just scrap that. 24th, pretty full roster here, it looks like. No open spots. Now, I've actually already gone over this with my team, so it should be pretty full. But this is just what you should be doing at the beginning of the waiver period. Now, on the 25th, the Saturday, I do have an open spot on D there, and a utility spot open. So there's an open spot on the 25th and an open spot on the 26th. It looks like a bunch of open spots on the 26th. That's a good day to get games. Now, if you're going to look for waiver wire guys, you got to be adding guys that are on the specific days that you don't have a full roster. Like if I were to go back to that game on the 23rd, I think. Yes, it looks like the 23rd. The 23rd, it's just a useless day for me because anybody I added, you can look here. I added Kagula and I added Shea Theodore this week, but I can't even play them this day. So it's a bit of a useless day to add players on unless there's specific categories you're trying to get. I suggest that more later in the week. If you get to a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and you're close in categories, you should be monitoring your matchups. This week's just begun. I'm a little late to get this out. But if you're noticing that it's close to the end of the week and you're really close in block shots or in shots on goal, then you should target those specific categories. You should not be adding guys just at any skill level. Say, like a point getter is not going to be useful if you have a 10-point lead in points. So you got to really target what you need and what you're aiming at. So that's how I break down what I'm going to look for during the week, and then I go to my own roster. And on my own roster, I sort generally by like 14 days or 30 days, and I check who's been playing well and who's not been playing well. And like I have a guy like Wayne Simmons who's been very cold, but I'm not going to drop him. There's no way I would drop him. Dorsett's a guy I just added, who I actually suggest in a lot of different categories leagues, because he gets good minutes in Vancouver, and Vancouver have a 4-day week this week, 4-game week this week, and that should give him a solid amount of penalty minutes, maybe hits. He actually gets good ice time, so there's a chance he'll get some points too, which is rare for a goon. Another guy I added this week, who I've seen dropped in a lot of leagues, is Dmitry Orlov at the bottom of my list there. Orlov is, I think, on the upswing. He's a good player. He's had a very horrible start to the year, and a lot of people are tired of him and have dropped him. But in his recent games, he's looked like he's kind of back on track. And I think he's got his ice time back. He's got his usage back. I think he's going to be fine as a 30 maybe 35-point defenseman this year. He's a good player that has had a rough start, so buy in on him. Now I added this guy Edler. He's only 3% owned in this format. I do suggest him this week if you have blocks as a category specifically, maybe shots on goal as well. He gets a lot of shots. But you can see in his short amount of time, he's had 2 4-block games, 2 3-block games. He's got a lot of hits as well, and he's getting shots. And in Vancouver, he's going to get ice time for sure. If he's healthy now, which it looks like he might be healthy, they weaned him back, and he had 24 minutes last game. I think he's usable in categories leagues, especially with the 4-game week. The 4-game week for me is even more useful for category stuffers like Edler or Dorset, because if you can get them in for those games, you're just going to bump up their stats a lot. Points is much more based on talent, I think, that you got to find the more talented players. But sometimes you can still look for points in games played. Who else did I add this week? Now, I added Drake Cagula. I was interested in him at the beginning of the year, but Edmonton were not giving him any usage, and they were not putting them with the McDavid line. It looks like he got put with the McDavid line last game, which he did. He got 2 goals. But the other thing to notice is he was -2. So he had 2 goals and yet was still -2, which is not a good sign. Now, I know plus minus is not the be all and end all at all. It's actually a lot of people would argue a useless stat. But when you have 2 goals while you're on the ice and are still -2, meaning 4 goals against him while he was on the ice, it's not representing he had a good defensive game, for sure. So we'll see if he actually sticks on that line. Edmonton also have a 4-game week, so I went for him just as a flyer at the beginning of the week. Probably I'll play him the 21st, 22nd, and then we'll see from there. And this is also a keeper league, so if by some means he stuck on that McDavid line, like you could see what happened to Maroon last year, he could be a very good keeper if he can keep that spot. That's another guy I added. I added Shea Theodore. Now, Shea Theodore has been dropped by a lot of people. He was drafted by a lot of people at the beginning of the year, but then dropped again. He's starting to get his usage up, which is a good sign for him. And he's a very good hockey player who is going to be a power play specialist down the line. I just thought that this was the time to take a flyer on him. And I think he's a buy low, and especially in keepers, his potential is to be a power play quarterback, and that's a rare thing. So it's worth, if you're not too worried about points this week, he's worth taking a flyer on, and he might step it up this week. He's been getting 3 shots a game. He's not going to help a lot with the categories, which kind of drives me crazy. I hate having defensemen that don't really fill any category other than points and shots, maybe. But he's a good hockey player, and I think I have a feeling this week he's going to get it going a little bit. So those are guys I added in this league. Now I'll go to my deeper league just to take a look at that, to show you some guys that I've added in that league. Now this team is much deeper, and I'm actually a team that is tanking a little bit in this league. So I've got a very bare bones roster. I've already traded Evander Kane this year, so I traded away one of my better players. Now, a lot of my roster actually looks like guys that you could have added. Barzal is a guy who's being added all over the place. He's an absolute add in my books. He gets face-offs. He's playing amazing and making New York Islanders look very smart for getting him. Matthew Perreault is a guy that I didn't add. I had him on my IR, but he's back this week. And when Matthew Perreault is available, get him, because he's a good player and he's going to get points while he's in the lineup. He's a guy that is always going to get hurt, so don't expect him to last a long time, but when he plays, he's absolutely a point getter. He'll get on big cold streaks as well, so just monitor him. Kerfoot, I continue to think is a good player, so I would absolutely grab him. A lot of people are dropping him, so I would go for him if people are getting rid of him after his good week last week. Kyle Connor, I'm still using. Absolutely is a valuable player the rest of the year, I would say. Athanasio in Detroit, another very good player, I think, who's getting it going now and kind of showing why he wanted a bigger contract in Detroit. Good little guy to add. I snagged him a few weeks ago when he had signed his contract, and I think he's going to be valuable all year. DeBrincat, it continues to be good. Chicago is not looking as good, but he's one of the bright spots in their team. Good young player, getting a lot of shots, getting good usage. I like him. I really like him as a player. Bjorkstrand has been solid all year. Another good guy. He's in the mold of Wenberg last year, I would say, in Columbus. They seem to do a good job bringing up young players and putting them in good situations. Okposo has got it going again. Now, if Okposo is on your waiver wire, I suggest to grab him. He's I've said this I think 3 different times this year, but I think now he's actually got it going. He went on a 4-point streak there 2 games, maybe 6 games ago, and starting to look a little better. He's still getting a lot of minus on his record, but that's going to happen with a lot of Buffalo players. Might be a good time to grab him. I'm not sure, though. He's just a guy I can never give up on. Now, lower down, I've got Edler on this team as well. I've got Orlov on this team as well. I snagged both of them from waivers this week. Why not? I think that they do have value. They're good overall players, and Edler is going to hurt you with minus, but he's playing great right now, especially with blocks and hits. He's a really helpful player. I've also got Kagula on this team, Shea Theodore on this team. You can see I have a lot of the same players from both leagues, so that's an interesting thing to see. Now I've stored Jacob Chitran on my IR. He's probably sitting on a lot of waivers. I really do think he's a good hockey player. If you look at his stats last year, he had big minus, but his hits and his blocks are really solid for a young player. And I think that number will go up a lot with more ice time. So he could really be a stat stuffer. That's what my kind of hope is for him. He also gets penalty minutes. He's a tough boy, the Chitran. So I think he's worth stashing if you have a category league. That's about it. I can look quickly at my much less deep team. Now this is a much less deep team. The guys I added this week, I'm actually considering dropping Tyler Toffoli. This is a stacked roster. I'm winning this league by a lot. But the guys I actually added this week were, let me see, I'll go down a bit. I'm dropping Dadonov. Dadonov is a good player, but he's on a cold run, and Florida only played 2 games this week. So Dadonov is worthy of dropping, I would say, right now in most formats. Not if you have a very deep format. He is a good hockey player, maybe. We'll see. He's streaky, clearly. And I think that's it. I didn't really add anybody in this league. I was looking at guys, but there's not a lot I was looking at changing in this league. I am dominating this league by a lot. So I've got a 22-win lead on anybody else at this early in the year, which is kind of crazy. And a 74% win percentage. So I'm just going to sit on this roster until something changes. I think it's a pretty good roster, clearly. Those are just a few things I was noticing in waivers this week. There's other guys to look at, but the guys I was targeting mostly were Edler, Kagula, Orlov if he's available, and Dorsett I like in Vancouver as well. Remember, Vancouver have a 4-game week. Edmonton have a 4-game week. Nashville, I think, have a 4-game week. And if you're ever looking at where to find that information, how do I know how many games they have? Very simply, type in most games NHL this week in your Google, and you'll get Daily Faceoff, which is a great website. right here, Daily Faceoff. And Daily Faceoff will give you a week-by-week breakdown of who plays what games on what days. So you can see it's Anaheim have 4 games, Arizona 4 games, Buffalo 4 games, Calgary 4 games. Now, you're not only looking at who plays 4 games, you should be looking at who plays 2 games. So Chicago plays 2 games. So if you have iffy Chicago players, we're not talking Patrick Kane, we're not talking Taves or Keith or even Crawford. But guys that are more iffy, maybe a DeBrincat, if you have a very stacked roster, guys like that you might want to drop this week. In Florida, like Dadonov is a guy that you might want to get rid of this week, kind of useless. Other teams here, you can see Edmonton 4 games, Minnesota 4 games, Nashville, New Jersey, San Jose, Toronto, Vancouver, Washington Capitals, and Vancouver Canucks. So there's a bunch of teams there with 4 games, a lot of teams with 4 games. Now, you can also see what days they play. So this is a very simple way to see what days have valuable games. Like the 21st, if you just look at the 21st, you can see there's Montreal. There's only a few teams playing this day. So that'll be a day that if you can get players on that day, like Edmonton players, Vancouver players, they have a lot of value because even teams that don't play 4 games, having games on that day, they're guys you will put in your roster. So that's a good thing. You want to get those guys in your roster. I think the other day I noticed was the 26th is a day that has a lot of open spots. So again, it looks like Vancouver again. Yes, Vancouver again. So Vancouver plays both of those days. That's why I stacked up on them. Vancouver has Philly and New York on those, the 21st and the 26th. So that holds a lot of value. So does Edmonton, plays on the 21st and the 26th. Again, holds a lot of value. So that's why I specifically targeted them. You should do that every week, really. You shouldn't just be adding anybody willy-nilly unless there's some lucky guy that's been dropped that you've noticed. You might want to go for a guy like that. But if it is a player that is, if you're just trying to fill categories, basically, then you want to make sure that you get them in your lineup. And that means you got to look for those low-value games. So it's Edmonton and Vancouver are the big waiver targets this week, is my suggestion to most people. The 20th is not a bad day as well. So if you can get the 20th, 21st, and 26th, those specific days, focus on those teams. Now, there's a lot of people playing on the 20th, but I bet you could still fit some of them in your roster. So the 20th, 21st, and 26th are really good target days. I mentioned some of the names, but really my targets this week, again, Edler, Kagula, Orlov, and that's really it. Dorset maybe as well. So good luck. Hope this helps some people, and hopefully you'll check out our podcast tonight with the Hockey Outsiders.